Hey everyone, this is your OG, Original Gamer, and this is another Godforge video. It is Thursday again, and we have another podcast speed recap for you. This week, Chosen, Sham, and Simon welcome the two Oris, and we find out that two are better than one. They talk about game development and their new Monster Idol game that is open for early testing. And we'll be taking this 50 plus minute video and shortening it down for you so you can stay up to date without it taking too long. Without further ado, let's optimize.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Fateless podcast episode, and we've got a fun one today. Joining us are two special guests, Ladarsky and Ori.
All right, so Ladarsky and Ori, but Ladarsky's first name is also Ori. So they are the two Oris. They are from Heimdall Games, and they are joining Brad, Chosen, Simon, and Sham for this week's podcast. Okay, so they get into their intros and how their journey has begun. Here, Ladarsky talks about working with Plarium and starting Heimdall Games, and he met the other Ori 7 years ago at Code Fanatics before they were with Plarium. He was the other Ori that we'll see here was the Chief Technology Officer. On the left here, he was the chief technology officer for the same company that Ladarsky here was working with. So that's how they met. They're both players as well as being in the gaming industry. And Ori here talks about Ladarsky talked about MapleStory and playing it on his uncle's computer and playing Clash of Clans. And then here Ori talks about a very lengthy history. We'll kind of touch on it a few times in this video, but he has a lengthy history with gaming, very big gamer. So they pressed on him a little bit, what is the game? They're trying to, Fateless Crew's trying to get a better feel for what this game is that they're putting out, as they're a young new game development company as well, and it's just the two Oris together as well as their outsourced labor and everything like that, and that's making this game. Okay, so they talk about balancing what they want to do against what they should do or have to do. They talked about doing lots of research, lots of market research around their market and how could they differentiate, really looking at how to balance complexity of the game versus speed to market and the ability to keep growing it ahead of their player base. So that was interesting. And then they talk about building the team and how, there's a joke going that you have to be named Ori to get hired because they're already at 100% of that. So you need, here you go, HR, here's your challenge. Only hire Oris, go, So that was great. They talks about moving from idea to action and bringing their experience to the table. And this is where they talk a lot about their background, what they like, what kind of gaming experience they have. Ori has had almost 7,000 hours in Diablo, which was right on par with Chosen, so really a high level gamer, spent a lot of time. We'll keep touching on that as we go through it. And then he talks about they talk about reimagining idle RPGs. And so an idle RPG is something where your role-playing game, you're playing as a character, but you kind of can set it like in advance and then let it sort of run. And there's a progression. You're always just sort of building your champ, building that role player to be better, and to go through harder and harder content. But the idle RPG is more designed to just sort of be set and forgot rather than manually, choosing the skills and things of that nature. So it was an interesting discussion. I wasn't as familiar with idle RPGs as I was after this, so it definitely informed me quite a bit, and then I went and looked and worked to learn more about it. But this is what these two are looking to do, is build an RPG style game, kind of like take pieces of Raid and pull it out of there and into the idle RPG space. Ledarsky mentions that games like Legend of Mushroom or Idle Heroes are some of the ones that are like most profitable in this idle RPG space, but they feel, and the other Ori mentions that they feel like it's an underdeveloped part of the gaming spectrum is idle RPG. But they are facing startup challenges like any business would, and they mention needing to remain highly focused strategically while to keep from chasing too many fronts at once. Like there's only two of them. They need to be very focused. He mentioned on not stretching too far or going after too many things at the same time because they can't adequately do that. Then they get to designing with purpose here. And this is where Ori talks about having more than 100,000 hours of RPG gameplay time, which is absolutely crazy. It's a lot of hours. I think Sham said he converted it later, and it was like 11 years worth of play. It's crazy. But he talks about starting with Grand Theft Auto 2 and then all the way through the Grand Theft Auto series, Vice City. He played Diablo. Again, his player time, how much time he played in Diablo was on par with what Chosen had played, and Chosen's team had won the first 18 seasons of Diablo, so like that just goes to show you where he was at in terms of playing some of these games. Simon also kind of talks about some of his gaming experiences and how he used to play a lot of World of Warcraft, and he loved having this like Friday night raid where you'd grind all week to get ready so that you'd have everything you need to be in that position to be that right cog for your team on that raid experience. So he said, kind of felt like everyone's counting on you. You wanted to do your part, and he appreciated that community piece of it. That leads in to their discussion about making community central. And Simon goes on to talk about Clash of Clans because Ledarsky also had played Clash of Clans as well. And Simon mentions how he enjoyed the work because of the community. Without the community, it's not as fun of a game. It's because you're doing it with other people that makes it a lot of fun. So they ask, how do you build community in idle RPG where it's idle, where it's not really designed to be as interactive. So I feel like building a community might be even a little tougher. And they talk about that, and both of them are pretty much along the same philosophy from a business perspective, which is generate that MVP or that minimal viable product and then put it out there and let your market give you feedback and let them help you build it, rather than the philosophy of build it and they will come. So it's good to see that. I think in today's day and age, things are too competitive and there's just too many variables changing too quickly for us to adequately be able to put our finger in the air and say it's going to be this in 9 months. And so I think that progressive improvement, similar to what Fateless has been showing they're doing, is the only way to go forward, because you have to be able to adapt to a very changing world and local market and culture and all of that sort of thing. So we get into that, and then Ori provides a good thing. He's a good piece to mention here. He says he's thinking always about how much of the game how much time does the game require of a player every day in order to be acceptable for their clan or their community. So he thinks about that in terms of how he builds community, so that you're not requiring so much of someone and they have to make a choice at some point with their real life and the amount of time they play in the game. You want to balance that. So he brings that up as well. I think it might be a neat idea. I don't know. This could be kind of controversial, but maybe what if some of the spend options are like quality of life upgrades that let you shorten the amount of time it takes you in the game? I know in like Raid, a lot of these have been just, upgrades to the game, to make it faster and easier to sort and to find your gear and to sell it. But maybe it could be offered as like a pay to play type thing as well. Not that we're looking for every opportunity to make spend options, but if it just improves like how little time or how much time it takes you to manage your account, well, then it's giving you an advantage, but not so much of an advantage in your account. So maybe that's a way to strike a balance with spend as well. That could be done probably with like a membership maybe, and then that comes with like quality of life upgrades or something like that lets you do things quicker inside the game. Anyways, we get on to launching their first build, and we get to kind of see the game that they are building. So this is an idle RPG, and it's called Monster let me see if I get it right. Monster Idol, I believe. Monster Idol is the name of it. And yeah, you can keep getting new gear, and there's lots of different gear sets, and it's just very progression based. You just keep going and defeating more things and building up and gathering more resources. And so you never really stop that progressive feeling. So that's a pretty neat piece of it. That they talk about trying to build community and getting valuable information from them. He says that they mentioned the game is launched on Android devices for testers. If you go join their Discord, you can join and you can request to be a tester. At the bottom in the links for this video for the podcast are the links to the Discord and to their testing application. So we will make sure that we leave those as well so that you can support them. Then they get into speed of development, or how to try the game. We talked about that. Speed of development. So they had an interesting philosophy here. They said that you should put your product out, or your game, your minimum viable product, when you are ashamed of it. They said that's when it's ready for first testing. So Fateless, obviously, Simon talked about, the wrestling match they're always kind of in as to when to show things if it's not perfect and clean, because people make judgments and decide, but also you need the feedback. So he talks about the balancing act with that as well. So it's good to see that Fateless isn't the only game studio that is working with this balance and trying to get a good feel for it. They mention with speed of development, Simon mentions the expectation was that things happen faster than they really do in game development, that it takes longer than you think to do just, anything. And I think that's true. I think that's true in a lot of project management world areas, because just the smallest things can add a slew of downstream tasks. Every little change you make ripples through and is connected. So totally understand that. So then Simon turns and says, okay, so how do you balance scope, cost, and quality, right? How do you balance the pace of your build, or how quickly you're building the game and getting it out? How the cost of the team and investment rounds. And he mentions that Fateless has had 2 investment rounds, private investment rounds, which he credits to the community, so that's just individual investors who are accredited and can invest and decide they want to, and they've done a private placement and they've raised that money. Now that Simon mentions that's not typical, that in a lot of cases this would be a VC play, and I agree with him, but wow, what a much better experience he's probably been on not having a VC play over the private placement. I don't want to speak for him, but I can only imagine those are better relationships. Nothing against VCs. I mean, everyone loves sharks and things like that at certain points and times, but the VC route can be a little rough, and you can be forced to give up a lot going that route. And so I think that this is powerful for Fateless down the road, in that they have not already sold off large portions of their equity in exchange for, the ability to bring this game to market. So that's huge from just a general business perspective. And they talk about, your OG pace of build, right? How do you pace your development? My favorite quote is, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. This is what we used to tell them, in the Marines, when you were practicing, house clearing or something like that. And we would get up to using live ammunition where, you turn a corner, you might be flagging somebody, you might be pointing your weapon right at them. So it can be a dangerous, very stressful type of training, but you build up to it. And what we'd always tell everybody is, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's how you move quickly while being under control. So I think that that's been their philosophy, but that's your OG's advice from the Marine Corps. So cost of the team, investment rounds, like Fateless was saying, they did 2 investment rounds, sort of a seed and maybe a bridge capital round to get them fully up to where they need to be to bring the game to market and to turn on their revenue. So I will tell you, and I put out a previous video on raising capital. Raising capital can be as time consuming as social media. So you can really get sucked into these relationships. And so it's good to hear that, at least from the Fateless side, that they kind of have it sort of done and behind them, and that it's not like they're not having these ongoing dragged out conversations in order to get the money, because that can always be something that really drains on your morale, and it really drains on your cash flow because you're needing that money to keep the ball moving forward and to keep that pace of build where you want it to be. And then the last of the three pieces he mentioned is gameplay feedback or quality assurance, making sure that it's hitting or it's landing the way that players expect, and it's not just like, this is all right, I guess, and they lose that excitement. So the two Oris mentioned that they think their strong suit is coming from a game development background at a high level, working for Plarium and several other places. But now as the boss, they also have the investor relations piece to work on as well, and it can feel pretty daunting. So they talk about that. They talk about learning from their players' behavior to help improve their game and really getting it out there. They showed their game to Plarium, and like Plarium's like, oh, I like that you did this, and noticed what they did. And so Simon mentions how like it's funny how you look back at previous versions and you're like, oh, it's awful, but before you thought it was great, and that how your standards kind of just keep getting raised over time, and that is rewarding. So then they go into defining full scope. And so the game that the Oris are putting out has like 20 minutes of gameplay, basically. You can play it for longer. There's, many different areas you can get into, but they expect their gamers to play it for about 20 minutes to give them their feedback and that testing. Sham asks, how long do they see the full game launch taking them, and Ori says here less than a year, but they're thinking as much as up to 18 months, but he's going to watch the KPIs. He says he's going to be looking for those key performance index metrics to know what that timeline should be like and how he should continue to expand that core loop of the game. So Sham also asked, like, what is your full roadmap and how long, do you see it taking? So he said year to 18 months. He talks about expanding the game loop, or he does with junctions and decision points. And he even talks about like the destructive process within the creative process, where sometimes you just, that was good, but tear it down. I think we can do it better. And Fateless, said we understand that as well. So they talk about KPIs that matter and early content that matters. So they mentioned that, their game, while they're expecting 20 minutes of play, can be played for up to 3 to 4 hours. But really what they're looking for in that 20 minutes of play, they're checking the technical side. They're making sure low-end devices can experience the game the way they intended to. They're looking at session times, amount of sessions. Does somebody play it and then come back and play again? They're looking at the behavior to understand what works for people and what doesn't. And they're gathering the right metrics because their investors need to see these game metrics. And Fateless mentions that, that was something that was fortunate for them, having private placement over VC investors, because VC investors are absolutely going to want to see these metrics that your game is growing along. And if you haven't launched the game and have no metrics, it's hard to get that VC investment. It's kind of a catch-22. Like, you need the metrics, but you need the money. So, And Ledarsky here makes a good point about how the smallest MVP or smallest version of Godforge is probably still pretty big. And Simon kind of laughs and says, "Yeah, we've been told for your first project this is good size, good work. You really bit off a good piece." But I think they've accepted that fact, and they are just churning through, grinding through the work it takes to get every part of their game ready to go. So what Ori mentions also in this portion is that idle games are all about, and this was news to me, I didn't realize this, but he says idle games, or this like genre they're in, is all about distilling the game down to the very first point when it's fun, and like figuring out what makes it fun, and then just like stripping away complexity of the game just to kind of make it a simple game that has progression at all times. So he does mention though too that like being in this business, this game development business, that it is a roller coaster ride of emotions, like, because you create something and it's like your baby and you get attached to it. So he makes a good point there about how much time and effort is poured into it, and so you do get very attached to it, and it can in fact impact your decision making or how you think about your game or how you think others should think about your game as well. So I thought that was a really good point, very kind of aware look at game development. So then we wrap it up with which gods, myths, and legends would you like to see in the game? Ludarsky says he loved Yu-Gi-Oh! When he was younger. And so, like, there were some, I think, Egyptian gods he mentioned from Yu-Gi-Oh! That he would love to see, which was cool. Ori, awesome. Stole one of my favorites, Poseidon. Didn't steal it, he used it. That was a good one. Poseidon's great when he talks about how he'd love to see more, like, with water-based champs, like drowning and stuff, which, that's awesome. We called that out a while back, how I'd love to see Poseidon and there wasn't a lot of water type gods. He also mentioned Sharknado, and then who knows, maybe we'll see a Sharknado collaboration in the game. I'm gonna say maybe not, but I think that would be hilarious if maybe it was like an April Fool's thing or something. But so that wraps them up for the podcast, and they are very interesting, very in-depth, very technical podcast for this week. But all around very interesting, getting a feel for all of the different philosophies that go into game development and producing high quality games that people will like to play. So thanks for stopping by and for sticking with us. Just doing this quick podcast speed recap. If you liked it, hit like, subscribe, and take care of yourself. And remember, play smarter.